The European Le Mans Series wrapped up their season. We'll talk about the women racing there and how they did in the finale. Jamie Chadwick, Formula Regionals. Her season continues on. We'll recap her past weekend. And the FIA Girls on Track Rising Star program. We'll tell you all about the last four right here on Grid Girls. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Girls, the women racing to win. My name is Joe with the Grid Network. Along with me, Daniel from Racers, the girls behind the helmet. We're here to recap the past weekend of all the women racing around the world, preview all the upcoming women racing, and report on all the news. We'll start with the European Le Mans Series and their season finale over at Portimao.
Good morning, everyone from the US, and good evening, everyone from Europe. Hi, Joe. And yes, the ELMS rounded out its season in Portimao in Portugal last weekend, just 1 week after the Formula One made its first appearance to the Portuguese venue of Circuito do Algarve. Very beautiful circuit, one of the best of the new generation, I think. European Le Mans Series had 5 rounds. Despite the short calendar, they managed to do all the 5 rounds that were scheduled. They had to do two rounds at Le Castellet in France because, of course, of the cancelled Monza races and Barcelona races and Silverstone. But Portimao was also the final round of the season last year. And this season, the European Le Mans Series went back to Portugal to round out its season. Of course, with 2 fully female teams, the European Le Mans Series made history this year, bringing the first ever fully female LMP2 class crew, in the all-female crew, with Tatiana Calderon, Sofia Flörsch, and Beitske Visser. They also did very well at Le Mans, the 24-hour Le Mans. They had pretty promising pace in free practice. They were consistently in the top 10. And Sofia Flörsch was set to do the qualifying session this weekend after she missed the qualifying in Monza. This time it was Tatiana Calderon that could not compete in the free practice, the second free practice session, and that's where the fastest driver get to run in qualifying. So Tatiana, for a red flag, she was not on track in the FP2. And Sofia did the qualifying session. Unfortunately, they had engine issues. They did not compete any single fast lap. So they were relegated at P14 at the very back of the LMP2 grid. That was a shame, but of course in endurance racing, qualifying is not as important as it would be in Formula 3 or in Formula 1, of course. So they had a full 4-hour race ahead to make up positions. Bajske Visser actually competed in the first stint of the race, and she had an amazing first stint, probably her best performance in the ELMS this season. She made up many places, and when she pitted to hand over to Sophia Flörsch, she was P9. At one point, she was also P8. So very, very competitive first part of the race for Bajske. Who was not certain when we spoke to her in Monza. She was not certain if she was making to the grid in Portimao, because of course Catherine Legg, the more experienced and team leader of the Richard Mille Racing team, was injured in pre-season testing in Le Castellet, and she tried. She said that she wanted to try to race in Portimao at least one race this year as a preparation for 2021. She wrote on Twitter that she's actually improving a lot. Her health is improving. Her leg is making improvements. But ultimately, Bajske Visser went to Portimao to do the race, and she had a fantastic race, first part of the race. Then Sophia Flörsch climbed into the LMP2 Oreca, and she was pretty okay. When she pitted for one last time to hand over to Tatiana Calderon, she was back to P10. She rejoined the race in P11, and then she made up to P10. She was back into the top 10 during her stint. They had pretty decent race, even always around the top 10. Also, Tatiana Calderon was at one point down in P13 in the final stint. And ultimately, after a couple of battles, and there were quite a lot of safety cars in the full course yellows during the 4 hours of Portimao, she finished P11, so another P11 for the girls. Their best result was the opening race in a P5 in Le Castellet. Then they had a 6th place in Spa-Francorchamps, a P11, then a P10 in Monza, and another P11. So definitely a positive first season for them. We have to remember that all of them are sports car rookies. All of them were LMP2 rookies, never competed in the series before, never ever did endurance racing. Only Tatiana Calderon had an endurance race before, and it was back in January when she competed in the 24-hour of Daytona. So definitely 3 rookies in endurance racing, and they will be back for a Richard Mille Racing for next year, and hopefully we will see them making some more progress in ELMS or even in the World Endurance Championship. When we spoke to Sophia, she was not sure which championship they were to compete next year. But of course, Richard Mille Racing was not the only fully female team competing in ELMS. Also, the Iron Dames, which is a team composed of Manuela Gosner, Michelle Gatting, and Rahel Fry, a very competitive team in the GTE category. They were competing. They were racing for the 3rd place in the point standings. They were P3 after their podium in Monza 2 weeks before. And yeah, they had amazing pace again. Michelle Gatting put the Ferrari 488 GTE car in 3rd place after qualifying, which was their best qualifying of the season. So definitely there were high hopes for the race in Portimao to finish 3rd in the championship, which was a result that they missed last season. Again, after Portimao, they were also racing for top 3, and a first lap incident put them out of the race very early on, and they finished P5. So definitely it was they were one of the top teams in GTE class. The sister Iron Lynx car was on pole position, so definitely a competitive team around the Portuguese track. But it was very clear early on that it was not their day, as Manuela Gosner had some problems during her first stint. She initially held the third place, but after after the first half an hour, very early on, she had a problem. Her car switched off and she had to park the car. Then luckily it was back on, so she could make it back to the pits. But of course, she had lost a lot of positions. She was back to P10 in 10th place, and actually had a pretty good first stint, because she made it back to 4th place when she handed over to Michelle Gatting for the central part of the race. Michelle had a very, very competitive central part of the race, and she was back to P4. So definitely a very competitive first part of the race for Michelle. And for the final stint, Rahel Frey tried all she had to basically to get back into podium position. She signed the fastest lap of the race overall. So that was testament of their pace. But unfortunately, many cars in GT class had tire issues with tire delaminating. Also, the race leader, the Porsche Proton number 77 car of Alessio Picariello, made a very last-minute pit stop because they were afraid. They had a huge gap on second-placed car, the Kessel Racing Ferrari. So they decided to do a one last stop just in case, because many cars had tire issues. And unfortunately, Rahel had a tire puncture at 15 minutes to go when they were P4. It would have been enough for them in points to finish P3, but unfortunately, the final pit stop put them in 6th place, which meant that for just 1 point, they finished 4th in the standings after the Portimao season finale.
Yeah, what a rookie season for, especially the team doing the first year at ELMS, European Le Mans Series racing, LMP2. Overall, that has to be a great feeling. Complete your first season like that, have good races every race, especially for rookies. It's always a big challenge. And one of the big challenges, of course, we're going to be talking about next is Hailie Deegan. Hailie Deegan, of course, this time competing in an IMSA race at Laguna Seca. Of course, NASCAR next year, looking at more road courses throughout the top 3 series of Cup, Xfinity, and Trucks, where she'll be racing full time. She was at Laguna Seca in a Ford Mustang GT4. Overall, had a pretty good race. She came in P11 overall. Good effort for her, especially considering, taking that experience, learning at the IMSA race, trying to apply that to next year in the Truck Series race. It's always going to be a big advantage for her as she continues to learn and grow. So we'll definitely be following more of Hailie Deegan, especially next year when she's in the Truck Series as well. Now, of course, she was not the only lady racing that weekend. We had Taylor Hagler. She was racing as well, too. Taylor, of course, she's always very competitive in her number 77 Honda Civic in the TCR class. Came home P19 overall, so 19th class, but 4th in class. So, 4th in class, 19th overall. This is equaling her best finish after she missed 2 races due to COVID earlier this year. And of course, we also had Sheena Monk. She was racing at Laguna Seca as well, and overall had a really good race. Came home 9th place, but the big thing for her, she another good top 10, but she also has already this year an overall win this year at Road America. So overall, a really good season for Sheena. Definitely, of course, Taylor racing there as well at Laguna Seca with Hailie Deegan. Of course, right now for IMSA, their season's coming to a conclusion as well. 2020 has been one of those seasons where a lot of things have been going on, impacting motorsports across the globe. And of course, we want to encourage all our viewers, as we talk about all the drivers, you'll see their name as well as their Instagram or Twitter accounts. So we encourage you to go follow them and share them on each and every week. And next up, we'll talk about Jamie Chadwick.
Yes, indeed. Jamie was racing in Formula Regional European Championship at Barcelona. The Formula Regional Championship is one of the series that I've been following trackside this season. Unfortunately, due to the new travel restrictions around Europe, I couldn't make it to Barcelona. Hopefully, I will make it to the final 2 rounds, which will be contested again in Italy, in Imola and Vallelunga, later this month. The Barcelona race, it was another challenging round for Jamie. Jamie, it is no secret that she has been having a very character building season so far in Europe, in the Formula Regional European Championship. Of course, after winning the W Series and winning races and having podium finishes in the Formula 3 Asia, everyone was expecting Jamie to be, let's say, one of the podium contenders in the Formula 3 European Championship. Which is one of the most competitive Formula 3 series around the world, except for the FIA International Formula 3 Championship, which races alongside Formula 1, and where Sophia Flörsch has been competing this year. Jamie, it was her first season with Prema. Prema is the top team in that series. Last year they dominated every round, but now it's been a couple of rounds that they're not struggling because they are always around the podium positions, but they're not dominating like early on in the season. At Monza, the KIC Motorsport, Patrick Pasma and Consola Palainen have been very competitive. They've been winning all 3 races in Monza. And this past weekend in Barcelona, the Van Amersfoort Racing team, which were Pierre-Louis Chauvet and actually Dennis Hauger, rookie, were racing. Dennis Hauger has been racing in the FIA Formula 3 Championship, so definitely not a driver who is not, very a total rookie in Formula 3 machinery. But of course, he was his first weekend in the Formula 3 regional for Van Amersfoort, which has not been like the benchmark in the Formula Regional series so far. He claimed 2 pole positions out of the 3 races. The other one went to his teammate. And the Van Amersfoort racing team claimed their first win in the series ever. Sophia Flörsch was racing with them last year in the Formula Regional. So actually, it was also part of her success because she developed the car early on last year, and Van Amersfoort, the Dutch team, made a lot of progress throughout the 2 seasons in the Formula Regional European Championship. Jamie Chadwick had a pretty difficult qualifying. Let's say she was P11 on Saturday. During the first 2 races, she was fighting around the top 10. She was P11, P10, P9. She actually had very, very positive starts. She had 2 amazing starts off the line in the race 1 and the race 2. Unfortunately, her pace, she was struggling a little bit for pace, and in the second half of the races, she dropped back a little bit. But the pack was pretty much bunched up all throughout the race 1 and race 2. There were no big gaps throughout the field, so it was, let's say, not the results that Jamie would have hoped for at the beginning of the season. But again, that's what she said. It's a character building season next year. She said to us that she will not be again into the Formula Regional, so we will see what the future holds for her. Definitely, if the W Series and from what we know, the W Series will be back on track next year, she will try to defend her title. Obviously, the big news from from the Formula Regional Championship last weekend was the merge that we said that a couple of weeks ago on our program, but it's now official. The Formula Regional European Championship and the Formula Renault Euro Cup will merge next year to shape one of the most competitive championship feeder series in Europe next year. Because the W Series uses the same chassis, the same Formula 3 Tattoo chassis, it is likely that we will see some female racers trying to compete also in the Formula Regional, which will be named Alpine Formula Regional to complete the marketing strategy that Alpine, the Renault brand, has been starting for Alpine. So we will see what the future holds for this championship next year.
Very interesting news, of course. As you mentioned, we had reported a couple of weeks ago. Definitely is going to be a developing story. We'll be following it here on Grid Girls, as well as our Grid Tonight programs, where we'll report on everything with racing news. Now, of course, going back to this past weekend as well, we also had Jennifer Jo Cobb. She was racing in Martinsville in the Truck Series, started 29th, and that's where she came home. Of course, Martinsville, a short track. In the short tracks, especially in the United States, a lot of beating and banging, very physical racing. So to come home 29th, complete, as many laps as she could, definitely a good effort because there was a lot of trucks out there, especially since it was the last race before the championship round. A lot of beating and banging. Some trucks didn't make it to the end. A lot of cautions. So definitely bringing home the truck in one piece. A big, of course, success effort for Jennifer Jo Cobb. Another driver that had a lot of success this weekend was definitely Laura Kreiheimer. She had an eventful weekend over at TCR Germany. It was pretty much a surprise debut for her. She is very experienced when it comes to GT as well, but has actually little experience on touring cars and only has driven really the Volkswagen Golf TCR before this upcoming weekend. Now, she was completely different from the Hyundai i30 TCR that she entered last weekend. This weekend, the track was literally flooded all weekend, which made her learning curve even steeper. She had a great race one, brought it home 6th place, as we talk about just about everyone was flying off the track. Of course, the wet weather with the standing water there, it just made it really hard. So for her to come home 6th place, just log in those laps, gain that experience, big win for her. Now, of course, the second race, reverse grid, and it was a little bit of a tricky start for her because she had no experience when it comes to a stand and start. So with that bit of inexperience, she fell back, essentially dropped back to 8th place. Still a good and different experience for her as well. Of course, anytime a driver going in a situation where you got such a unique circumstance of a wet track, then a stand and start, it's always a good opportunity to learn, and especially once you get past those obstacles, log in the laps. One of the big things, of course, we definitely talked to her, and we definitely want to give Vivian from Racers to Girls Behind the Helmet a big thank you for getting the interview. Overall, she said about this weekend, Laura, that it was a great chance for me and a great possibility to get to know something completely different. One could believe that the Golf TCR, which I drove in endurance racing, has something in common with the Hyundai, but that is not the case. Both are completely different cars, which surprised me as well, as the Hyundai does not have driving aids, traction control, and so on. Now, in the spirit vision of the car and the whole vehicle dynamics are completely different. This is really good from Laura to explain, especially to the fans out there, on how, even though it's all very similar, especially if you're brand new and they just look like street production cars, there's a lot of differences when it comes to the different vehicles, the different types of racing. And of course, she continues on. It was a very difficult conditions to learn the car better. But this way, I was able to learn even more. The stand and start was quite tricky since I never had done a stand and start before and really challenge it on a wet track. And I had to say that unfortunately, I messed up the start twice. Now, of course, first time we've seen even in Formula One, the stand and start is so important. Indy cars a few years ago, they tried stand and start. They had a big pile up. It is one of the most tricky starting things any driver has to master. United States, of course, we a lot of times see rolling start, so a standing start. Mostly you'll see in Europe, but it's very important to learn. And of course, you got to start somewhere. So learning it at this level and some more for her. She closes out by saying, in this class, it's difficult to get back places you lost because the level is very high. It was very close to do this event, and I'm thankful to take this with me from the whole weekend. And it was a lot of fun. I hope I'll get a chance to be part of it again. So definitely, overall, could have been, a weekend where with all the challenges, it could have gone downhill, especially if she didn't log the laps in the wet condition, didn't do a stand and start just because of some error, but she did the stand and start. She got that experience, logging the laps in the wet conditions while others were struggling. She came home, brought the car home, and overall a really good weekend for Laura. So definitely, just want to say to everyone out there, be sure to follow all the women that we talk about racing week in, week out. They're out there racing against some of the best in their class in the world. And of course, we definitely encourage everyone to just follow them, as well as Racers, the Girls Behind the Helmet. Link below in our video description. Now, here is the upcoming races for the upcoming weekend.
Yeah, another big weekend for TCR. This time it's TCR Europe, the Continental Series, where Jessica Bachmann and Michelle Halder are racing in that series. Of course, Jessica, it's her second season in the European TCR. Well, it's their first season for Michelle. Michelle, who has a victory to her name earlier this year in Zolder, while Jessica had a couple of podiums last year. She had quite a tough season so far, but I think she can do well the next race. Which is a circuit that nobody knows because the first time that the series travels to Jarama, outside of Madrid, Spain. So also Michelle, who was racing last year in the German TCR, the championship that Joe just talked about, where Laura Kraham raced the past weekend at Lausitzring. She had a very, very positive season so far. Together with her brother, they are racing in a family run team. They're doing very well, and hopefully they will close their season on a high at Jarama. Also on that Spanish track, there is Formula 4 Spain. Formula 4 Spain that had it's a back-to-back round for them. They raced the past weekend also at Motorland Aragon. And Lena Buhler, who is a very young Swiss racer, she was a pretty big name in karting. We often spoke about her here on the grid. Last weekend, she had a very, very positive race, actually, because she claimed her first top 5 finish. We always say that she's very competitive. I always expect her to be around the top 5 and top 6. She had quite an unlucky first part of the season when a couple of accidents too much. But of course, Lena has pace. She always proves that in practice sessions. She had a little bit more difficult qualifying. She was P9, so she improved the qualifying results in Motorland. And she was fighting for P5 in race 1. Actually, when they went 3 by side on the main straight, and another driver basically took her off because he turned into her and broke her front suspension. So a very unlucky first race for Lena, and another one in race 2 on Saturday evening when. She had another retirement from when she was fighting for P7, P6. She was P7, and on the very last lap, she had a contact and broke her front wing, and she drove all the way back to the grid, and she retired. Actually, it was a very disappointing first day for her, but Efforts were rewarded on Sunday when finally she had a clean race and she finished P5, and it was her first P5 in the championship and in car racing, because it's her first year in Formula 4. So also in a championship, which is a very competitive series this year. The Formula 4 Spanish championship is one of the upcoming more and more competitive series, not quite at the level of Italian Formula 4 yet, but definitely picking up pace. More and more popular around Europe. So very good job from Lina. Let's see what she can do in Jarama this weekend. Also, the other GT Masters series will be back for its final round of the season, a season finale for the top GT3 championship in Germany. They were racing at Lausitzring, of course, together with the TCR Germany. There are 3 female drivers racing in that series. Were Simona De Silvestro, Kerry Schreiner, and Rahel Frey. They all missed the round at Lausitzring. Simona's car had to be rebuilt at the Porsche workshop last weekend after following a testing crash. So the team could not send the car in time and in shape at Lausitzring, but they will be back this weekend at Oschersleben. And then, of course, Rahel Frey was competing in Portimao last weekend and could not be in the ADAC GT Masters Championship. And Kerry Schreiner wrote on her Instagram page that she was not traveling to Lausitzring because of a bad cold, and she didn't want, especially during those times, to put any of her team in a dangerous situation. From what I know, she is racing this weekend in Oschersleben for the final round of the season. So best of luck to all of them. And of course, together with the other GT Masters, there's also the GT4, where the Kreuzpointner twins are racing, and also Claudia Hurtgen. But also the British GT Championship will be doing its final round of the season with Mia Fluid. Mia is a Swedish racer, very experienced, was been winning races this year. And so definitely in the Pro-Am GT3 class in the McLaren, she is hopefully set for more podiums or even a win in class. And Joe, of course, there's also the NASCAR Trucks series back on track this weekend.
That's right. The NASCAR Truck Series, it will be racing this weekend, and it will just be Jennifer Jo Cobb racing this upcoming weekend. Of course, this weekend, the season finale for the Truck Series. So after this race, 2020 season's over. This was part of the original plan prior to the pandemic. With the pandemic, of course, NASCAR, all their series had a lot of changes, including the Truck Series. But this was the plan, original date to end the season at Phoenix Raceway. For Jennifer Jo Cobb, she'll be the only woman racing in this weekend's field. Natalie Decker announced after her race in Martinsville that she will not be competing again in 2020. Of course, we do hope to see her racing next year in the Truck Series. That will be a big, thing where, especially with her social media following, she definitely has the following where people want to see her at the track. People are following her on social media. It's good for the sport and just good to introduce more people to motorsports. Now, of course, one of the big things, of course, with motorsports and being introduced is the FIA Rising Star program. Essentially, the Rising Star program, they are now down to 4 drivers. Essentially, Julia, we got over from Brazil, Doreen from France, Antonella from Brazil, and then, of course, Maya went from the Netherlands. So those are the final 4 when it comes to the Rising Star program from the FIA. Now, Daniel, I know we've been following this story with the FIA, the Final 4. Can you tell us a little bit about, especially for some of our newer viewers, what are these girls racing for? What opportunities are ahead?
Well, definitely, we've been following closely this program because it's one of the most interesting programs that the FIA Women in Motorsports Commission has been promoting. Of course, they are in partnership with the Ferrari Driver Academy, which is a massive step forward for any young female driver trying to make it big into motorsports, and especially in Formula cars. It's really important because when when it comes to female in motorsport, the most important thing is starting at grassroots levels, and so far there hasn't been any grassroots level program yet in karting. So the initial selections were started in karting actually last year, when many young women were assessed into karting. A couple of months ago, there was the first collective test at Le Castellet, when 20 drivers went side by side in the south of France. From that test, 3 days test, 8 drivers were selected. And they went to Paul Ricard this in the past 2 days actually, where they tested the Formula 4 car. So definitely a big switch. We spoke about that in the previous episode about the switch from karting to Formula 4, which is quite a big step. And of course, now we have the 4 names that will make it to the third stage, which is Antonella Bassani from Brazil, as you said. It's actually interesting to see both the Brazilian ladies making the cut. Doriane Pin, who is still racing. She missed the karting selections because she was allowed to do so, of course, because she's already racing in car racing. She's racing in touring cars, actually, in the Renault Clio Cup this year in France. So interesting to see her making the cut in the Formula 4 as well. And Maya Weog, of course. Maya is a really, really competitive driver. I would say that she was probably on our list, on our top 3 list. At the beginning of the selection, we interviewed her. Actually, Simone, my colleague, did a pretty interesting interview with her. So if you haven't read it, we definitely encourage you to go to our website, Racers Behind the Helmet, and check out our interview page, where you can find quite a lot of interviews to young karting drivers. And among them, there's also the interview Simone did with Maya. Maya is a Spanish, Belgian, Dutch driver. She's also now competing with the Dutch flag, but very interesting mix for her. Doing very well in karting, in international karting. She has been racing in Italy, which is like the home of international karting in the past. So definitely not a new name for someone who is following the big championship, the European and the World Championship in karting. And they will be again testing. I don't know when yet, but these are the names that will go. That will battle for a place in the Ferrari Driver Academy. There was also Arthur Leclerc in the jury in the past 2 days. Arthur is, of course, the brother of Charles, the famous Formula 1 driver from Ferrari. Arthur is also a member of the Ferrari Driver Academy, and is racing and currently leading the Formula Regional European Championship. So definitely a young driver that knows a thing or two about making it to the bigger series. He will hopefully assist and support those 4 young drivers into their next steps in motorsport.
Definitely, it's really exciting. It's been exciting following them. Of course, everyone on social media has been sharing, especially the Final Four. Definitely, I encourage everyone to follow. And of course, this month we've been seeing the hashtag Women in Motorsports Month. So definitely, we encourage everyone, check out that hashtag. A lot of stories, especially on Twitter, of women involved in racing, not just as the race car driver, but as engineers, pit crews, management levels. It's been really rewarding to see that really grow this month, and definitely we're looking forward for it, especially next year when the hashtag comes around in November, to keep expanding with that. With that said, that will conclude our program. We want to thank everyone for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe, so that way you don't miss any of our programs. Of course, later on today, we'll have a special grid tonight where we're going to be previewing the NASCAR Cup Series weekend and report on the latest breaking news involving MotoGP and Yamaha. For Daniel at the Racers Behind the Helmet, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.